Hi, Kate. It's my real pleasure to spend some time with you, interviewing you. Just to say to everyone first, you've been my mentor and my teacher for the last year. And for me, this experience has been like a remembering of who I am as a woman, as a creature on earth, as a human being. And I've been wondering and I've been wanting to interview you and to ask you more about your teachers and your influences and your trajectory for a while. So before I ask you these questions, I'm just going to introduce you for whoever doesn't know you. So after a lifetime of devotion to the ways of mystery, earth, soul, and eros, her extraordinary path of feminine initiation has brought her to the edge of the long-lost mysteries of the wild. Here, Kate serves as a guide to the mysteries of soul by facilitating the remembrance of the lost arts of the feminine. Our modern culture has banished and demonized the primordial power held within our feminine eros and its creative expression. We are at a time on the planet where this reclamation is not only possible, but necessary. Kate believes that our creative life force energy, once fully embodied, is the revolutionary force that will change the world. She's devoted to creating alchemical journeys that catalyze the unfurling of the tender and powerful essence of each soul to come forth in service of reimagining a culture rooted in true love and mythical wildness. Wow. And just gleaning over your online bio, I just read things like, which kind of echo this bio as well. You've written lover of all things wild, explorer of various cultures around the globe. You've trained in Gestalt therapy, psychotherapy in Brazil, in shamanism in Glastonbury. You've done an apprenticeship in the deep feminine in Spain and in the UK. You've gone through the Soulcraft training with Bill Plotkin in the USA. You've also done experiential theatre in Spain. So you have quite a palette of talents and explorations. And I'm just wondering if you could tell us a bit more about yourself and what brought you to all of these explorations.
Well, thank you for that introduction, and also very delighted to be with you in this way. So how can I say that? I think really it's my destiny unfolding that has led me on this path. I've always been interested in how humans work. From a very early age, I started studying psychology. So I did psychology at A level. When I was 16, I went to a different college from all of my friends because the college of my school didn't offer psychology, and I really wanted to study psychology. So I went to a different college and then studied psychology and philosophy at university. And then left for South America, joined the circus, ran away and joined the circus, and spent a few years involved in the arts through circus, through dance, and then retook my passion for psychology and understanding humans, and trained in Brazil as a Gestalt psychotherapist. And so it's really been this kind of weaving of the artistic and the human soul expression. And, you know, as this was happening, I wasn't very aware, but now I'm 22 years down the line, I can kind of see the picture of, oh, that was, you know, the weaving together of all of these different aspects, all of these different inquiries, all of these different journeys, all of these different teachings. And so it's very beautiful to see how that has been really my destiny unfolding, and how I've taken one step and felt the call to immerse myself in these different things, and that's led to the next step and then the next step. So I never really envisioned it or planned that my life would be this rich array of palettes of experiences. It's just how it has unfolded by the way that I walk in the world.
Can you tell me a little bit more about your journey with, let's say, Elizabeth, Sarah, through the deep feminine?
Yeah, so that was almost 10 years ago, I think even 10 years ago now. And I'd returned from 7 years in South America. And I was going through my Saturn return, and I was 28. And as everybody knows, the Saturn return is quite earth shaking. And, you know, I was going through a big existential crisis, and a lot of things were falling away in my life. And very synchronistically, I was working with a therapist at the time, actually, who introduced me to the work of Elizabeth. She'd been working with her. And it was just a soul calling. So it was a year-long initiation into the deep feminine, and kind of undoing all of the unconscious cultural ways that we've inherited and adopted being woman, and kind of coming down to a more soul-based, earth-based unfurling of the true kind of essence of what it means to be woman through that year-long initiation. So it very much supported me in my Saturn return kind of crumbling. And in the same year, I was also immersed in a training in eco-psychology. So I was bringing that nature-based practice into my psychotherapy practice. And so I started to also see the parallel between what was happening to women was also happening to earth. And so kind of had this kind of eco-feminist, although I don't really associate with the traditional way of defining feminism, but having this consciousness, opening this consciousness of the real way in which the feminine had been repressed and degraded and neglected and abused and mistreated and all of these things. And when I speak of the feminine, I also speak to that aspect in men. So it's not a thing of women and men, it's a masculine and feminine, which are energies within both of us, within all of us, everybody's range of expression, gender expression. So yeah.
Can you speak a little bit more to what you just said around what you used the word crumbling, which is interesting. So what crumbled? What?
Well, I've had many crumblings over the years. I feel like, you know, the last 7 years has been, as I've been going through my own personal initiation and my own apprenticeships, it's been very much a crumbling, a constant crumbling. And it's a crumbling of the kind of ego identity of, you know, we're kind of conditioned and shaped by our culture and our family as we're growing up. And we adopt a persona that we've created from and can be very kind of young beliefs about how we're going to be in the world in order to be approved, to be loved, be accepted, be welcomed. And that can be misaligned with really the true and full expression of our soul. And so naturally the pattern is that because our soul is so powerful and so potent, and we often repress and lose parts of our soul as we're going through the journey of growing up, because these are powers and sensibilities that are not are too much for a small child, for example, and not necessarily welcome in our culture. So we have to kind of just now, the natural survival process is to lose some of these aspects, and then the journey of coming back is a journey of reclaiming them. So as you're going through as I've gone through the reclaiming, but as one goes through the reclaiming, it's a crumbling of this ego identity of, oh, this isn't actually who I am, and I have to I choose to integrate this deeper truth, which is really the essence of my soul. So that's a constant ego death, and I think there's an intensity when you begin that journey, and I feel that capacity to continuously surrender to the life of your soul is an art form that becomes less like an existential crisis and a big rumbling, and more of just a way of being and meeting life as we walk in the world.
Beautiful. Love that phrase, like falling, surrendering to the life of your soul. And can you tell me how you came to meet and hear about Bill Plotkin, the eco-psychology founder?
Yeah. So the same year that I was going through the initiation into the deep feminine and training in eco-psychology, I started to network where I was living in Bristol at the time, and I started to network with the eco-psychology people in Bristol. And somebody handed me a book at the meeting, and I read the book, and I think it was one of those books that really changed my life. It's Soulcraft. If you haven't already, I recommend reading it, because it just put into context, it was a vocalization of the journey that I'd lived, and hadn't had any context for it until I read this book. So it was like, wow. And then I knew that I had to do some work with Bill. So he came to England the year after, and I actually got news of this about 10 months before he was going to come. And somebody told me, and I was like, yeah, I'll just sign up for that, in a little while. And 2 months later, I was like, oh, maybe I'll just sign up for that, and I'll just get it done, and da-da. And then I sent an email, and they said, oh, I'm sorry, it's full. And I was like, well, it's 8 months away. Like, how can it be full? And I was like, and they were like, do you want to go on the wait list? And I was like, yeah, sure, put me on the wait list. And then 2 months after that, I had a dream that I got a place on the training. And then 2 weeks later, I had an email from the producer saying, there's a place, do you want it? And I was like, yeah, sure. So I went and did this program in Scotland, and it was a very powerful experience. And Bill was there with his partner, Janine, and they kept on dropping into the field, come to America, come to America, come to America. And this really stayed with me. So I left that program, and I was like, I think I've got to go to America. And then I was, this voice inside of me was like, go to America. And it kept on getting louder and louder. It was like, go to America. And I'd be there brushing my teeth and be like, go to America. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go to America. And so they have a year-long program, which is in an underworld journey that's over the course of a year. And the program was in August in Scotland that I finished. And so 2 weeks after that program, I'd handed in my application for the year-long, and it got accepted. And then 2 months later, I'd packed up everything, and I was on the plane to the States for the year. So that was very clear. And then I went through the year long, and it was very clear that part of my calling is to guide people through the underworld journey to soul. And so then I enrolled in the apprenticeship program with Animus, and that's been a 6-year apprenticeship, which I've just completed this year. And now I'm a guide for Animus. So that's also something, as well as my own body of work, which is more focused on the feminine eros and the expression of eros and theatre, which is also part of my training. I also serve as a guide for Animus, which is very exciting.
Yes, it's wonderful. And what you're offering, the elemental eros spirals, can you tell us how you came to create this, form this from all the teachings that you've been through? how did you learn to alchemize and to put it together to create this?
Oh, that's such a beautiful question. So it's really through my own embodied experience, because it's this 7-year apprenticeship and initiation process that I went through involved these 3 different lineages. So I had the deep feminine tantric lineage, I had the nature-based soul initiation lineage, and then on the year long, we went out on vision quest, and after my vision quest I started to receive poetry, and I started to create performance out of poetry, and it was very clear that I needed to give more life to the poetry. So then I found this very experimental theatre school in Barcelona that as soon as I saw it was like, I need to go there. And so I started to create performance out of my poetry, and then I trained to be an experimental actress. So really this whole 7-year period of just like following, okay, this next step took me to these 3 lineages, and it's through these 3 really deep immersions that I uncovered and have come into this soul awakening, soul embodiment. And so it's really just like I see how each piece of the lineage fits together, because I've lived it in my own body. It's been my own experience. So for me it's just a very organic offering to the world, because it's what I've experienced in my being. And so it just feels very, it's just the way that it's unfolded and revealed itself to me, that I can bring elements of each of these to what is now elemental eros.
Yes, and you've started to offer elemental eros a couple of years ago. Is that it? Or how long ago have you started?
It's been an evolving. So I've always kind of worked one-to-one with people through my psychotherapy, and then started to introduce more shamanic work, and then started to create one-to-one mentorship for women probably about 2 or 3 years ago now. And then elemental eros was birthed at the beginning of this year. So we're just going into the version 2. The second offering of elemental eros is beginning now in October. But it's been an accumulation of maps and experiences that have been forming and shaping over the last, it's kind of timeless, and in my practice, hard to put a timeline on it. But it's been evolving and emerging through all of my work that I've done with clients over the last 7 years.
Can you tell us a little bit more about elemental eros? Why is eros so important for you and the world?
That's a really good question, and I think that is such a vast question as well. And maybe in my answer I'll just touch an aspect of it, and I don't have a formulaic answer to this question either. It's very much still an emerging inquiry. And for me, our eros is the life force energy that lives deep within our soul. So when we are in alignment with our eros, we're organically aligned with our soul. And when we're aligned with our soul, we're also aligned with the world soul, because our soul is embedded in the code of earth soul. So it's a win-win if we align with our own eros energy, which is our unique expression of this kind of primal, powerful, tender, vulnerable, animalistic life force that lives in us. We do service to our soul, and when we do service to our own soul, we do service to the world soul. And I believe, and I'm passionate about recreating a culture that is aligned with soul, the world soul. And so I believe that happens within each of us. We need to do that. We need to find that place within us first, so that then we can create the culture that we're longing for, that we really deeply long for on the underneath.
Mm.
It's the revolution that happens on the inside rather than waiting for the governments and the outside forces to kind of give us what we want. It's going to come from us, basically.
Mm. And can you tell us, I know that you have different names, and I was wondering if you could explain, on your website you're calling yourself Silvermoon poetess.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a bit about how you came to find that name, or how that name came to you, for example?
Sure. So when we start on the journey, when we are on the journey of soul, our soul kind of speaks to us in very non-linear, poetic, irrational ways. It can speak to us through, it speaks to us through image, through poetry, through sensation, through deep feeling. And so it's part of our healthy ego task is to decode and allow the life of our soul to show us. So for example, we're kind of creating or coming to know our what Bill calls the mythopoetic identity. So this is kind of your more underworld, like in his model, we're working on the middle world, which is me and you sat here at the computer. There's also the upper world, which is we're all one and we're all love. And then there's the underworld, consciousness and spirituality, which is the work that we do at Animus, and it's the work that is I do with Elemental Eros, is tapping into this kind of underworld, spiritual consciousness, spirituality. And that is where your uniqueness, that is where your soul essence is informing how you came to this world to be particularly you. So when we're in relationship, when we're on this underworld journey, we are being worked by the deep myth of our lives. And so once we've awoken and opened our consciousness to this underworld consciousness, which isn't, it takes some attunement, it takes some experience. It's not something that I can necessarily say, okay, now let's attune to underworld consciousness. It's something you have to open to and experience within your own being. Then we suddenly start to hear the deep whispers of earth and this mythic tale that really tells us what many poets call the true name. I think David Whyte speaks about our true name. You might hear your true name. And these true names are really the names of our soul essence. So Silvermoon has come to me through my nature wanders. It's been affirmed through the deep mythical and mystical experiences that I have out in the wild. And these experiences are very hard to talk about because they're experiences that are felt deeply in the body. But when you have one, when you have a numinous experience with the mystical and mythical reality of the world, you know it because it vibrates in every being of your body. So through continuously immersing myself in this conversation with the underworld, all of these images and names and essences have revealed themselves to me. So Silvermoon is one of those.
Beautiful. And I love the way you talk about the deep, how we are worked by the deep myth of our lives. Mythology is something that's kind of gone from the world today. So how do we bring it back in our lives? What did you learn about that process?
Well, I feel like the myth is of the underworld consciousness. So the way to bring it back is to immerse ourselves in that consciousness, and through our connection with the natural world, like these mythic and it can really, the myth also comes from the myths are really of the collective unconscious. So the myths are still there, they haven't gone away. It's just our opening, because they're part of nature's law, because they're the primordial they're the primordial parts of creation. They can't go away. But what happens is, if we get disconnected from them, if we're not open to them, if we are not in relationship with them, then they start to express themselves or come through in very distorted ways. And so we start to see things like addiction and things like let me think of some examples. Yeah, things like
our sub-personalities come through rather
than the distortions of that primordial power manifest. So then you get pornography, you get pedophilia, you get
perversions.
Perversions, yeah. It's the transgression of it not being fully that primordial presence not being fully not being in relationship with it in the right way. So part of the work or part of the journey, should you choose to embark on a journey such as this one, is to welcome and discover and allow that deep myth its place at the table.
And from my experience, having gone through the first spiral of elemental eros, we work a lot with archetypes. And can you tell us a little bit about why archetypes are so important and how they relate to myth as well?
So the way that I see archetypes is that they are part of nature's law. They are an imprint that exists within nature, and they're frequencies, they're energies that exist within the natural world. And so the welcoming and the cultivation and the building a relationship with these archetypes allows us to welcome and remember those energies within us. It's not that we become these primordial frequencies, it's that we find a way that we have access to the resources that are stored within these archetypal frequencies and archetypal energies. And this gives us a fleshed out sense. It connects us to the more than human, for number one, which connects us to a deeper sense and deeper meaning and purpose of life. So it connects us to the divine presence within our human experience, and it connects us to this sense of the wildness. So it just expands our human reality and consciousness to encompass the deep ways of nature's law. If we are part of nature's law, and so it's an embrace of that is the remembrance.
And it's like you say, it's a compass, isn't it? It's a way to orient. That's
exactly
how I've experienced it as with each archetype. I find my signature. I find my as you say, the imprint of who I am. And just to bring this back to the wider picture, maybe the world picture, how would you say, you touched on the ecofeminism earlier, and how you feel that feminism is not really, it's not fully resonating with you the way it is today, the way it's defined today. So can you tell us a little bit about how you see yourself as a woman in the world today?
That's a good question. Well, maybe I'll just speak to the way I feel like feminism, or the feminine, or the movement with feminism, how it's kind of evolved. So I feel like it's been a very necessary process, is to reclaim our power and find equal status within culture. Within the culture, we have the right to vote, have equal pay, have equal voice, all of these things. And I think that's been a necessary empowerment process. And what I feel now in my own journey is that process has been so that women have a place in a culture that is inherently created out of a distorted masculine ideology and philosophy and values. And so that's not something that I actually adhere to or want. I want to be deeply in my own feminine values, which doesn't have actually a place in the culture. So for me, it's great that I can vote, and it's great that I have equal pay, and all of these things that have created a great foundation for me to actually be in the place where I can be like, okay, and that's not what I don't want to be a woman adhering to a male culture. So the way that I see it is really the way that I see of my own journey is I have these feminine qualities, and I have this feminine essence, and I have this feminine expression, and it's about creating more acceptance and space in my own life, but also within the way that I move in the world, so that the culture is changed to adapt more of these feminine values and essences and presences, and that are inherently more of the soul. So the deep poet, giving more value to the deep poetry, the interconnectedness, the love that's available through the feminine channel, our capacity to embrace totality, the capacity to embrace the fullness of life, all of these qualities and many, many, many more.
And how I know from my experience of immersing in the wild through the immersive journeys in elemental eros, that there's a very strong emphasis on relationship to land and to earth. So what is your own relationship as a woman, and how did it evolve with your native land?
Well, I'm only just actually returning to England after I've been away. I've lived in many different cultures over the last 15 years, and the last 15 years I've only spent 3.5 years in England. So I'm only just returning to England now, and I'm blessed to live on Dartmoor, which very much feels like Dartmoor has called me back. So I'm going to be rebuilding a relationship with this land from now on in. But really, my walk in the world has meant that, because I've lived in different cultures, has meant that I've become a citizen of the world. So the world has become my home. The world has become my native land. And I've found that deep belonging within my own body that means that I can go and move in the world and feel at ease and feel comfortable and feel a place in this world. So there was something in your question I wanted to ask, and it's not quite answer, but it's not quite coming back to me. But there's something about this belonging to our own being, to our own body, that is really the home that we are seeking, or that I feel I've sought, and that deep kind of being comfortable with who I am wherever I am.
And I'm fascinated with my relationship and our relationship, our return to this word, indigenousness. For me, it's very much resonating with your word, wild soul. That to me is so essential for our culture today. And I wonder how does that speak to you, that relationship with Indigenousness, with wild soul? How do you fuel it? How do you keep practicing, so that it feeds it? Feeds your wild. How do you feed your wild soul?
By feeding the wild, for me, what I know of Indigenous cultures, and I've never studied with what's typically the anybody from Indigenous culture, or what my understanding is, the relationship, the psychology of Indigenous-based cultures is their connection, their attunement to the natural world, so that their relationship with the animation of the world. And so Indigenous cultures that still remain and are still intact have this relationship and way of communing with the wild world that sees the world as a living thing. And so we Westerners have been so cut off and so divorced from that connection and that reality that we think that that the world is just this thing that we can pillage and resource and not have any respect, and it doesn't feel in it, and it's totally a false mentality, and it keeps us cut off from our own soul. What we do to the earth, we're also doing to our own soul. So for me, that we're all Indigenous, we all have an Indigenous connection to the world, in that we all know this connection and animation to the world. And so for me, the way, and this is what Bill speaks about in his work as well, he's never also studied with Indigenous peoples from Indigenous cultures. He says we need to relearn the ways as Westerners through our own psychology to remember our Indigenous ways. And what I see is that there's a natural law. And so if you go around all the different Indigenous cultures of the world, there'll be parallels, there'll be aspects, there'll be similarities of the practice that they do, because they're tapping into this natural law which exists, which is the deep myth, the deep structure of all of life, because that's how it's interwoven. It's the soul of the world. And so we as Westerners need to find a way to reestablish that connection with this natural law, and then feed it, and then relate to it, be in relationship with the animation of the world, speak to the world as the world is constantly speaking to us when we're available to listen. And that building of the relationship is magical. It brings the magic back into life. I think you've said this on a call that we've had, it's like bringing the magic to your front door. It's like, yes, this life and this world is magical, and we've lost that connection because we've lost our capacity to be in relationship with the animation of the world. And so for me, it's about reestablishing that relationship.
Learning the grammar of animacy. It's another author who speaks like that, and she's an Indigenous writer, Robin Wall Kimmerer.
Okay.
And I love what you say about being in relationship with the animation of the world. It's beautiful. Thank you. And I'm reading at the moment this book by Sharon Blackie, If Women Rose Rooted. And it reminded me a lot of the work that I've done with you, as to the unfolding of my inner whole woman. And at one point she quotes the poet Joy Arjo, and she says, "Oh woman, remember who you are. Women, it is the whole earth." And I'm wondering, how does it speak to you? And can you speak to that? The fact that the way she says, "Women, you are the whole earth," which I think is so beautiful.
Yeah, how to explain it in words. I mean, I know this inherently through my own embodied experience, as I said, going through the deep feminine initiation and also the eco-psychology training at the same time. And I guess what's coming is this womb that we carry that is has the capacity to birth life, whether that's through a physical baby or whether that's through the deep dreaming of our womb space consciousness. And when we are open to receive in that way, we're open to allow the spirit of life, the soul of life, to weave its magic through us. And so it comes a little bit back to this animation with the world of how are we in relationship with the soul of the world, and know our place. It's know our feet on the ground, and that these capacities, that this way of relating to the world isn't just some woo-woo thing that has no value or is, but it's very fundamentally part of our human experience that needs to be remembered and reclaimed, and needs to be given a very big place at the table with a very big plate of food and some fine silverware and a nice glass of wine, because it is fundamentally the juju, the essence, the magic that makes life meaningful and beautiful and loving and wonderful. So that's how I'd speak to that.
And what place do you see man as having at that table with women? How would you see the man's journey in parallel with woman's journey? Because in our culture, the masculine has also been altered and affected and corrupted in many ways.
Yeah, and it's often a question that I'm also attuning to, and because my journey has been of a woman and working especially with the feminine, but this, like I said at the beginning, I also have the masculine within me, and I also have the feminine with me, and any other gender has these different energies within them. And so if we're talking about a man, and in the man sense, he might identify more with his masculine qualities. As I'm a woman, I identify more with my feminine qualities, but without my masculine, my feminine just stays in the dream time. She doesn't manifest, she doesn't do anything, so it's very important for me to have my own masculine presence and strength with and cultivation, and that relationship within me. It's like the inner alchemical marriage. And so I see for the men, they also have this feminine, they also have the deep poetry, they also have the deep sensibility and the sensitivity, and their way of relating to the wild, and their way of loving, and their ways of being in relationship. And I guess, I don't know, because I'm not a man and haven't had this experience, their way of coming into relationship is going to be different from the psychology of I'm a man who is very masculine. But within this, it's all very fluid, because there are men that are also men, but they're feminine, and then we have all of the beautiful rainbow of colors of all the different ways of the gender identification and gender, and so it's not so rigid. So it's very hard to, I'm speaking from my experience as a woman who identifies with the feminine, but men have I think everybody has their own journey of coming into relationship with the wildness within them, and then they can see how that relates to, maybe the masculine and the feminine terms don't resonate for them, maybe there are different terms, maybe it's light and dark, or yin and yang, or something completely different. But it's all really about allowing this other life, this life of our inner world, this life of this deep mystery that we have inside, to have life outside of us.
What do you wish for the woman you are to become in today's world? You mentioned in your bio that there's, just going back to it now. Maybe you can speak to that.
Which bit in my bio, sorry?
Where you're saying that we are at a time on the planet where the reclamation is not only possible, but necessary, the reclamation of our feminine eros and its creative expression. So how do you see yourself as a woman in today's world? What's your path forward?
Well, I feel like I'm on that path of having been through my own initiation and my own apprenticeship, of now creating containers and alchemical journeys for other women to be in that reclamation and that discovery. And at the moment it's focused on women, but I also see in the future that that may open to be co-ed. So I'm listening for that. I'm listening for when and how that wants to take shape. So for me, it's just becoming more fully who I'm being called to be, which is, and this is, for me, this is the deep eros of living, is devoting to this calling from the wild to create these alchemical transformational journeys for others to come into relationship with their own wildness and live in alignment with that wildness, so we can create a culture that's rooted in love and wildness. So that's my mission. That's my mission statement that I wake up with and go to sleep with and walk with, and that's what I'm devoted to.
Lovely. And so what's happening in your life right now? I know you're saying that something is starting pretty soon, the first spiral of elemental eros.
Yes.
Can you speak to us a little bit about that and about the journey, about the first, because it's a 2-year or 3-year journey, is it?
It's a 3-year journey, yes. So the first, it's called Elemental Eros Spiral 1 at the moment. The name might change. And then we have Elemental Eros Spiral 2 and Spiral 3. So Elemental Eros Spiral 1, which is obviously the first step, is beginning the 15th of October, and it's a 5-month online journey. So it runs October till February. And then we have a retreat in Crete, which will be September next year. And that's beginning now, October the 15th. And we'll meet every other week for 9 sessions online in a group, and we'll walk through the 4 directions, the north, east, south and west, activating these primordial imprints of wholeness within our psyches, coming into relationship with them, working them on the line. You've been through the journey, so I know that you can speak to it. It's very beautiful, embodied, relational way of coming into connection with the wildness within and without. It's like the weaving of the inner and the outer, and really, yeah, I see it as this figure of 8, kind of snake-like, weaving our way back into the land through embodied experience. So that's starting October the 15th.
Lovely. It's like learning to play one's own instrument in many ways.
That's a great metaphor, yeah.
Becoming more fluent and fluid. And then this spiral 2, and which is about much more the underworld, isn't it?
Right, so thank you. Yeah, spiral 1 is very much like the preparatory ground that we need to establish, that we need to cultivate with our own being, to then be able to descend into the underworld journey. So spiral 2 is that descent, and involves a vision quest and lots of meeting with the gatekeepers and further crumbling away of our ego identities and coming into to know this richness of our soul, to know the life of our soul, to walk and to be infused by this. The metaphor that Bill has also for the underworld journey is the caterpillar that goes into the cocoon. So it's kind of like you go, and the imaginal, the butterfly is created by the imaginal cells of the caterpillar turning to liquid. So the caterpillar turns to liquid within the cocoon, and then out of that liquid, out of those imaginal cells, emerges the butterfly. So really the underworld journey is the dissolution of the caterpillar and the emergence of the butterfly. And what happens in that cocoon phase of the imaginal, mythical, mystical, being informed, creates the colors and the wings and the shape of the butterfly. But that's a very, I mean, if you think about that process in the natural world, I mean, it's mind-blowing. It blows your mind. There's no logical, rational explanation for what happens in that cocoon. So that's essentially the invitation of Spiral 2.
And then there's also a very important part, as we haven't touched on yet, but it's the Shakti dance, the deep feminine erotic dance that you're offering every week.
Yeah, so that's also part of the elemental eros journey, as well as the sessions. We also dance weekly, and that is really a way of activating and opening this eros within your own body, this erotic connection to life, to the mystery within your own body, so that you're more susceptible and more receptive to the life and the conversation of the mystery unfolding within your own soul.
Mm-hmm. And how did you come across this dance? Where did you learn, or how?
So this dance is part of the initiation to the deep feminine.
Okay.
And so after I completed that year, then I went into further training with Elizabeth and a group of sisters. And then after many moons and many spirals, we were each anointed with the blessing to teach the dance.
Lovely. Mm-hmm. And then Spiral 3?
So Spiral 3 will be the embodiment of your soul embodiment. So really it's like the enactment. So Spiral 3 is going to be everything that you've gathered, everything that you've discovered on your descent to the underworld. It's going to be an allowing of that life to keep revealing itself through you, and my intention is to make this more to bring in the theatre at this stage, so to weave in the embodiment through theatre, through exploration, through creates like your enactment to the world. It's like your art form, it's like your manifestation, and we're going to do this in a very creative, expressive way through the medium of theatre.
Wonderful. Looking forward to all that. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to ask you about in parallel, I've seen that you're offering a guided journey with animals. Mm-hmm. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, the Soul Animus has many different programs that have been created over the years that the Institute has been alive, which has been over 30 years now. This is, I think, nearly as old as I am. Not quite, but it's good to know that it has that length. And so the one that I'm offering online is, I think, the 20th of October. It begins the 20th of October. It's a Soulcraft Intensive. And that's one of the introductory programs to the Animus world. And we take people on this, what is known as, so Soulcraft is an array, like a menu of all of these different wonderful practices and immersions and ceremonies that allow you to come into this conversation with the natural world. And so the Soulcraft initiation journey is an offering of that.
Sounds very intriguing. I'm wondering, so how do you work it through the online medium? How does that work? This
well, very much as it would in Elemental Eros, is we have group sessions, 3 hours long, and I think we have 7 3-hour sessions over the course of 3 or 4 weeks. And so it's 3-hour sessions, and then at the end of each session, we'll invite you to a nature wander, and then then you'll have a 2-day gap, and then you'll have space to go out into the wild to engage with the invitation, and then you bring it back to the next session, and then we will work together in the group or work together in clans and support you to deepen in, and then you'll be invited into another. So in the traditional sense, we'd do a soulcraft journey, we'd be together for 5 days in a really intense retreat, but because of the current pandemic, this is a way that we can work, deliver the soulcraft journey, and you get to do it on your own home, from your own home and on your own land. And so everything that we would deliver in a retreat, we'd just deliver over these 7 days, over these 7 sessions. And so in between sessions, you'd do the nature wonder, and then we'd come back, and then we'd just keep deepening into the journey until we get to the end. So that's how, yeah.
Thank you. Anything you want to tell people about your work, how they come in, if they are interested, how do they get in touch with you?
Sure, yeah. Well, I've got my website at the moment, which is silvermoonpoetry.com. I'm going through a massive rebirth at the moment, which hopefully come the end of this winter will be out into the world, which is where I'll have elemental eros and all of the different offerings under one kind of school. But for now, you can find me silvermoonpoetry.com. I'm also on social media, so Instagram and Facebook, Kate Joyner. You can find me there, or send me an email, info@silvermoonpoetry.com, and sign up to my email list. I think that was probably the best way to keep in touch with all of my things.
Lovely. Massive rebirth. That sounds interesting.
I know.
Lovely. So thank you so much, Kate. I know you're having a live Q&A session tomorrow on Facebook.
Yes.
If anybody wants to join in as well.
Yes.
And ask questions more about the elemental eros and your journey. For now, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for asking me these beautiful questions and for your involvement over this year. It's been beautiful to be with you.
Thank you. Likewise.